Workers in the skilled trades are at greater risk of mental health issues than the general population. On this Build Out Live special, Jill Alexander and I are joined by an expert panel for discussion on mental health safety in the trades. Welcome to this Build Out special. I'm Jim Kunkel. Today we're going to have an expert panel. We're going to be discussing mental health safety in the trades. My co-host today is Jill Alexander from Safewaze. Jill, welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. Glad to be back with you.
No problem. Hey, Jill, before we would start, why don't we do a round of background on everybody? Why don't we start with you, your background, what you do for Safewaze?
So I'm in marketing here at Safewaze. I've been here for a year, and I am new to the safety world here the last year. I came from food and beverage, but we deal primarily with fall protection, and we work with a lot of folks in construction as well as other trades, working at heights and keeping them safe. And so on my personal side, I have been very involved in mental health advocacy, and it's very interesting to me to see the intersection between construction and the trades and the mental health issues, which are thankfully becoming very visible today.
Yeah, so true. Safety Sam, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Tell you who I am. Sam, Safety Sam Hawkins. I'm a safety consultant. So I've been doing occupational health and safety for almost 24 years. I've been a consultant, owner of YDE for 8 years. I partner with companies and help, overall just keep workers safe. I hear the echo that's throwing me off a little bit. I don't know if you hear it. But again, this is a big deal to me because earlier this year, OSHA put out, kind of a push to talk about this in construction. And being that push was put out, I had a couple different conversations with some crews and started getting texts back from guys that thanked me for just talking about it, thanked me for having a conversation. So for me, it alerted me that this is something that we need to talk about. And it kind of mirrored with something else I do. I coach boxers. And boxers are known similar to construction, tough people and stuff. Boxers are known the same. And as a coach of boxing, you'll be surprised how much it's more mentoring them and talking and listening to these tough guys who have, a lot of things on their mind, a lot of things they're working through. I see the same thing in construction. So that's why I'm here as much as I'm on the panel as an expert, I'm here as an advocate and here to learn from the professionals so I can be better geared to help as I see, these things.
Yeah, excellent. That's what this is all about. It's all about having a conversation, having a discussion, and also a learning opportunity for all of us and for the viewers who will be watching this special live stream. Sarah.
Hi, happy to be here. My name's Rashmee-Souri. I've been a licensed psychotherapist for almost 28 years now, and I currently have my own private practice in the greater Pittsburgh area, which I love. I also like to do some professional speaking. I sometimes speak on KDK TV News as a mental health expert. As a couple of you alluded to, I think this is a really important topic. I've certainly dealt with a lot of families of people in the trades that in the ways of mental health issues, and also have done some workshops in that area. So I think this is a good topic to be talking about today, and I'm excited to be part of the panel. Thank you.
Welcome. Matt.
How you doing? I'm Matt Clarke. I'm a safety manager for construction located down in Dallas, Texas. I've been in construction since '95 after getting out of the Army. I've been in safety since 1999. I've actually been doing talks on suicide prevention and depression on my construction sites for about 15 years now, just knowing how bad it is. Over the past year, I've really gotten a lot more heavily involved in it because I finally admitted to myself something that I've suffered pretty much my whole life from depression. And I actually attempted suicide twice whenever I was a teenager. And so I've been seeking help for that. And so through that, I've kind of opened up my advocacy quite a bit more. And so I've been doing some speaking for some ASSP chapters, Regional Hispanic Contractor Association, doing stand downs, just did another conference a couple weeks ago for a construction safety professionals conference. So just trying to get the message out there that it is a pandemic and we need to end it.
So true. So true. Thank you for sharing that personal story as well, Matt. Thank you very much. Rhonda?
Hi, Rhonda here. I work at Globaltranz. We're a transportation broker industry. We service the supply chain and work with carriers and different people in the transportation industry, including truckers, seafarers. And over the past year, actually now it's been almost 2 years now. Wow, since COVID, mental health was front and center for us because our truck drivers were dealing with more isolation, more so than typically they would deal with, and limited resources for safe place to rest, safe places to eat, and what have you, because there were all these shutdowns. So we've spent the last 2 years really focusing on mindfulness in our workplace. And as we all move to our virtual workspaces, we've really found the need for providing mental health services for our team so that we can show up as our best self, not only for people in our new working environment, but also for ourselves as a team, so that we can continue to work through all the challenges which still continue. So excited to be here and share some of our perspectives and learnings and what we have found helpful to keep us healthy.
So glad to have you. Juliet?
Hey there. I'm also a licensed therapist. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I own a private practice with 7 other clinicians, mental health clinicians, a dietitian, massage therapist. We really try to treat the whole person and focus on full wellness. During the pandemic, I started a podcast called Who You Callin' Crazy? And my Instagram handle, Yep, I Go to Therapy. And my mission is to help end the stigma and elevate the conversation around mental health. So I also do a lot of speaking and news appearances and what show up wherever I can to try to help further that mission. So I'm really honored to be here.
It's an honor to have you as well. For the viewers, please post comments, ask questions. What I'd ask you to do is to put a cue in front of your questions so that when I do go through the comments that are posted, to make sure that I can distinguish between a comment and a question, because we want to focus hard on the questions. Earlier, someone had mentioned about, we're almost 2 years still trying to come out of a pandemic. And that has caused so much anxiety, uncertainty, mental health stresses on everyone, and especially more so on the trades. Projects delayed, projects canceled, different protocols required for COVID safety. What are some of the current mental health crisis challenges that you're experiencing out there right now? Anyone from the panel?
I'll start just by kind of laying, validating all of that uncertainty is the foundation of anxiety. And this past 2 years has been uncertain, and it's constantly changing, the constantly changing science, the constantly changing recommendations, that has fueled just so much sense of loss of control. And when we feel like we don't have a lot of control, it impacts how we make decisions, it impacts how we show up in our day-to-day. And so just to kind of toss out there that uncertainty has caused so much anxiety. So if people had any level of anxiety prior to this, it has been exacerbated. If they had any levels of depressive symptoms, it has been exacerbated. I mean, we have just been inundated with people in need, and that's sad because so many more people are struggling. But the reframe of that is that a lot more people are seeking support now. So I'm just seeing a lot of more acute cases, again, not just anxiety, depression, but lots of other co-occurring disorders like substance abuse or eating disorders and things like that the level of struggle is really intense.
I agree with that, Juliet. And to add to that, also, you mentioned the losses, and that's been so huge, right? So the loss of what we're used to, the loss in some cases of jobs, of homes, of our usual financial status that we're used to, and even losses of relationships. People have struggled in those areas. So I think there's a lot there, and certainly, like, as you said, exacerbated the past couple of years more than ever.
And, with the construction industry, it's always been a high stress, high depression, high suicide rate industry. And, thankfully we were allowed to work throughout the entire pandemic as an essential workforce. But even with that, a lot of construction workers, they spend the majority of their time, as most trades do, most industries, they spend the majority of our time with our coworkers. And one of the problems with construction, one of the reasons why the rates are so high is that they're often away from their families, traveling. And so their core support group is not who they're around a whole lot. Sure. And so they really go to rely on the people they work with. Well, then all of a sudden we got the pandemic of COVID, and you can't be around those people anymore. So, now they're driving themselves in. They don't have those people to talk to on a daily basis. They're not carpooling anymore. They're not staying with their coworkers in a hotel. So, it did drive all that up quite a bit. So.
Yeah, the isolation, right? And just how many of our go-to coping skills were taken from us, not only just connecting with others, but so many other things. Maybe we went and met people for dinner. You couldn't do that anymore. Group exercise, maybe that was helpful. You couldn't do that anymore. So we had to figure out how to cope differently.
Yeah, I think that was one of the unfortunate side effects of this lockdown, is I don't think it was really thought through how those pro-social behaviors really were important to us surviving this mentally and being able to adapt a little more flexibly. So when we're locked in these spaces, and then we have lack of access to any type of resources, even like telemedicine wasn't really popular then. Like there was this whole stigma about privacy issues and concerns. And then all of a sudden, okay, now we can reach out to a therapist through our cell phones and not have to have that. There was this whole mountain of wave of different elements that came into play. And, I kudos to all of you providing counseling services, because there's definitely a need. I mean, even with our young population, seeing, kids now, they can't go to school, now they're home with the families, and that whole dynamic has changed. Stresses of mothers and fathers trying to work and also homeschool their children. I mean, it really was a lot. And I think that for me personally, it was getting permission, or not permission, but seeing leadership double down on efforts to support employee health and well-being, and being flexible and allowing space for the team to do whatever it was they needed without fear of losing their jobs. So I think that was something that was critical to help us navigate through.
And for me, it's that fear and that stigma and that culture that Matt was talking about. And obviously, all of these things that you've just been talking about with COVID have really brought that to light. And I think one of the positive things about adding technology into the mix, that you can do a teledoc appointment, you can do a chat appointment, is that it helps address some of what I think really lends itself to one of the reasons that we see so much more mental health crisis in the trades, is because of this culture of, my husband was in the military, and you don't talk about your problems. You're a construction worker, you're a welder, you're a tough guy, and you don't talk about your problems. Yeah. And so when that culture exists, and then you get it, you've got that as an underlying problem, and then you've got something like COVID that takes away your support mechanisms. I'm hopeful, and maybe you guys have seen this advance of technology where you can text for help, or you can do a teledoc call or a phone call for therapy. Do you feel like that might help some of these folks that are maybe conditioned not to reach out and ask for help, open that window for them?
Can I throw a real quick plug in there since you mentioned it? Anybody at any time can text the word help, hope, home, anything to 741-741. And you get text crisis counseling right there on the spot for free. So
absolutely.
I do think what's opened up in the world of virtual therapy has been huge. People that would have never come to therapy started coming. I think Juliet could probably relate to that, right? I mean, we got so busy because now they could do it on their lunch break. They could do it from home. They didn't have to have a 45-minute drive back and forth to the office and then sit there and wait. It just became much more accessible to most people. So hopefully that will continue to be the case and be beneficial to those in the trades as well.
Well, I think what's been helpful here is these conversations, but these conversations coming from leaders in the company. So, because we talk about trades, and I know we talk about it being a stigma behind it, and because you're a tough guy, you don't speak up. But there's a couple things that comes with that, and one of the biggest one I see is a lot of times you don't see these individual things as a problem. So a lot of what we do daily, man or woman, so not just a construction tough guy, is we have a small problem, we deal with it. We have another small problem, we deal with it. Some of that, what you mentioned was COVID happened, and then you had 12 problems sitting on you, and now this is, and you look up and it's a problem. I mean, I think about myself with injuries. So I work out, I work with boxers. A shoulder hurt, a knee hurts. All of a sudden, if I have my shoulder, knee, back, and my ankle hurt, and now I'm finally at the doctor. But I worked on another 4 injuries for 3 weeks, and I think some of these, when we had these conversations, some of these construction workers and trade workers can look up and say, you know what, that is a problem. I was thinking this, because you fight battles in your mind all the time, and you used to being able to wave that one off and wave it off. So when you start hearing people talk about this as an issue, and secondly, what to do when you have that problem, because it's not just that we don't talk about it. It's we're in the mindset sometimes of what's the point of talking about it if it doesn't help. But when you reach out and say, hey, call this number or text this number or this virtual option, now I have options that I didn't think I had before. So that's where these conversations are huge to me. I think that's where I'm seeing a turn just in, like I say, I've had maybe 2 talks on this, and I am a newbie on the subject completely. But immediately I got text right back and said, great conversation. Thanks for having that conversation. And that made me want to learn more about it, just because I know those 2 people were helped in that conversation.
I think it's
culturally. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Juliet, please.
Well, I was just going to kind of address that, like, stigma is what we're talking about, right? That for the first time we all went through this collective trauma together. And so it was the first time we were able to all say, like, this sucks, the struggle is real. So that helped some of it, but there are a lot of layers to stigma. I mean, on an individual level, you've got intersections of race and culture and religion and all these things where sometimes families have learned, like, we don't put our business out there, or we like all these different kinds of layers that also that play into it. But then you've got the other layers of people not understanding what therapy is. So I think that's the thing about these conversations is it's not just some old guy sitting there and you lay on the couch and talk about your problems like the movies show you. These conversations help you understand that it can look a lot of different ways, and that you have the agency to be able to find a therapist that you click with and that can meet your needs. But I think that's part of it, is that people don't know what it is. And so then they think things like, well, that's not for me. I'm not crazy, quote unquote crazy, or my problems aren't bad enough, or how do I know when I'm supposed to go to therapy? So to your point, Sam, being able to have these conversations to tell you there's really not a wrong time to go to therapy. There doesn't have to be a crisis, or there can be. I mean, to be able to talk about those things very openly is really helpful.
Yeah, one of the problems is culturally, we're not really set up to talk about our feelings very well, right? If you think about it, especially in America, hey, how you doing today? Or how are you? Is kind of it's a hello, right? And so when someone asks that, the culturally acceptable answer is, I'm great, I'm good. How are you? I'm good. But in reality, we're not all good. We're all broken a little bit. And people tend to think that, well, just like Juliet said, well, I'm not crazy. And they tend to feel like their problems probably aren't as bad as others. But the reality is about 30% of Americans suffer from mental health issues. And so when you really try to get those numbers out there to people and they start realizing how prevalent that is, then it's a lot easier for them to end that stigma and go to seek help for it.
Can I add one caveat to that too? I think a lot of it also is not only our belief systems and how we've been conditioned to think maybe not in a positive mindset, like the benefits of seeking mental health care. Like we take care of all different parts of our self, like our physical self. We exercise, we try to eat healthy. We if we're sick, we go to the doctors. If we need sleep, we make sure we prioritize healthy sleep habits. But that trust variable, I think sometimes is an issue because there's this fear that we're going to be judged when we speak to someone, or this fear of if someone else knows that we're going to seek some care, like as you alluded to, Juliet, like there's something wrong with us.
Yep.
So I think that trust is a big thing that may hold someone back from seeking that care, that fear, and even themselves, like that unconscious bias they have about how they feel about themselves because they're actually doing something that's actually really restorative to their well-being.
And that really goes back to, I think, what Sam was touching upon, is setting up these cultures of these environments where it's okay to say, hey, I have to leave for a long lunch today because I have a therapy appointment. Or, if you had to go to the dentist, if you had to go, for an x-ray, you'd schedule that time. And to normalize that and to set up these, like you were saying, these environments where people feel it is safe for them to say that, yep, I go to therapy. It's so funny. I love that, Juliet, because 10 years ago, I was at a chamber speaking event. And the woman walked up and said, I'm married. I have 4 kids. I'm happily married. And I'm seeing someone. Yep. My husband knows about it. I'm seeing a therapist. Right. And normalizing that conversation to say, it's okay. I have to go hop out in the car and have my therapy appointment for lunch today. Right.
Yes. Yes.
And I do think that stigma is starting to change.
Yes.
I mean, just even a few years ago, I had a client who came to me and did not want her husband to know she was in therapy. So she was at the gym when she was coming to see me after work on the day that she came. But now I've had clients saying, since the pandemic, like everybody's in therapy. And now that's a quote like, well, my therapist said this. Well, my therapist said that. So it is changing slowly. I'm really happy to see that.
Well, and I have the mental health from a personal standpoint for my eldest child and my husband. My husband was a Marine Corps and has PTSD and suffered with it for 30 years while we were going through mental health struggles and severe depression and hospitalizations for suicide attempts with my 8 to 24-year-old, right? So we're going through all this, and my husband was still not okay saying, hey, I need help too. Or I can go to therapy, or I can talk to somebody too. It just that internal compass of saying, I'm weak. If I admit this, I am weak. And that was drilled into him as a Marine and in the trades for, his entire life, that it's not okay to admit that you need help.
That's a good point. Jill, you were talking about related to suicide rates, and I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but construction industry has the second highest suicide rates. Let's talk about the challenges and also to this issue facing construction industry with such a high rate of suicides.
If I can share a story that just last week I had a conversation with 2 different gentlemen in the construction industry, my husband as well. And it's kind of like Safety Sam alluded to earlier, this, macho man kind of attitude that, tough boys, not complaining, the way they even communicate to each other isn't exactly in the most positive mindset. Like their normal everyday language is kind of very aggressive, and they haven't really thought, oh, maybe, if we communicate with one another in a more healthy mindset, maybe that can help in terms of how we feel about our job and our purpose, versus just going for a paycheck. So the one gentleman that I spoke to last week, he tried to commit suicide several times, drinking constantly, drinking on the job, drinking after work. It impacted his relationship with his family. And there were 3 different times he attempted to take his life. And he said, I asked him, I was like, what made that change for you? He said, I decided enough was enough. And I was going to do one thing today for me that was positive, and that was walking. And then walking led to another behavior. So instead of drinking the Jack Daniels, I decided to put it down and went for a walk. And I stopped making excuses for myself and using crutches as a way to deal with my emotions. And then eventually he sought care. So it was just that one little step, that one little aha moment that I think if men could give themselves some kindness and some compassion, you know, and let down some of the guards that, you know, society really has put upon them in the trades, I think that could be really helpful.
Yeah, and construction, you know, some of the challenges there, it's a high stress environment, right? There's a lot going on around you. You're always behind schedule. I've never had an owner come up and say, hey, you are doing a great job. Here's an extra month on your schedule, right? It's a bunch of alpha males. There's more and more females getting into construction, but it's still a very heavily dominated male industry. They've all got their own opinions. They're all hard-headed. There are a lot of arguments on a job site. And then the travel away from your core support group, you know, it's long hours, late nights, early mornings, and it just lends itself to a very stressful environment, unfortunately.
You know, Matt, John asked a question here. Are there any training resources available for managers to help them be more aware of mental health issues? That's the big thing when it comes to recognizing and then also to what's the next step. Any resources that are available out there?
Yeah, and actually, John, I saw that picture. You have a hard hat on. Construction Industry Association for Suicide Prevention. I'll say that again. Construction Industry Association for Suicide Prevention, the CIASP, has tons and tons of resources out there available. And, you know, we've already kind of mentioned this, but companies are starting to be a little more proactive and talk about mental wellness. And it's extremely important because if you want your workers to be healthy and happy, then you have to address that at a core level. You have to get that mental health issue out there, because if somebody's dealing with mental issues, then they're not going to be as effective on the job site. They're 41% more likely to suffer an unintentional injury. Their workers' comp costs are going to go up. So all those things have to be brought into the total safety of a company.
And on that point, to be able to add mental health as a distraction. So Safewaze is a fall protection company, fall prevention company. And so you're not going to allow your workers at height to be working if they show up intoxicated or under the influence of or with too much cold medicine or limping and in pain. You know, these are distractions from the job site that are going to make them more likely to fall. And if they're mentally distracted, they're more likely to fall.
Absolutely.
I also wanted to add another resource. I looked up and they had some pretty cool stuff. There was the Center of Construction for Research and Training, Center of Construction for Research and Training. They have a lot of toolbox talks out there on this subject. They have them in English and Spanish, a bunch of different stuff there to pull from. I actually pulled some as I was trying to learn from this, and was able to use some of that information to help myself a little bit more. And to one of the points that you made, Matt, with making this about safety. So for me, I'll tell you a conversation that I had 2 years ago, which made this click when OSHA kind of made a big deal about it around May. So about 2 years ago, I'm in Indiana. I'm a consultant. I work with companies to keep their workers from getting safe, but prevent OSHA citations and all that stuff. Partnered with the company who had a OSHA citation. I went to talk with the director of OSHA in Indiana to negotiate that. And the summary was we talked about the citation, but we got off on a side subject about fatalities in Indiana. And these numbers are pretty close across the country. So aside from suicide right now, when we talk about fatalities in Indiana, they're pretty close across the country. About 90, these are work-related fatalities I'm talking about. About 97% of those are male. About 59, 55% of those are white male. And then the highest rate of those are middle age. Now, when you look at the numbers right now for suicide and construction, those numbers are pretty close to the same.
Yeah.
Wow.
So exactly what you talked about, Matt, is this being distracted working, whether it ends up being recorded as a work-related suicide or work-related fatality. It's kind of a group there that we're looking at and we need to focus on too. Not to not help everybody, but we can gear in and really pay attention and be able to let this group know that, hey, we do care, there is help, here's resources, and pay attention and be vigilant when I'm walking the job sites. And you talk about fall protection, the difference of when I know somebody has training, when I know they have equipment, when I know they know exactly how to use fall protection, but I see them working on the roof edge without it. My question at that point, most safety people are hollering, "What are you doing?" But my real question at this point is, what is he really thinking right now? You know, he has all the tools to do it, and he's choosing to stand there right now. Is this a situation where I'm hollering at him and forcing him to jump, or am I having a conversation to bring him back? So we can notice that and pay attention to that, because those numbers are pretty close across the board as well.
Wow, that's an interesting correlation. Amazing.
Another great tool that's out there. Most companies, not just construction, but most companies have people that are CPR and first aid trained, right? And especially in construction, I mean, we really push it for the trades. But if you were to think about that, how many people have actually used CPR, right? It's very few. But there is actually mental health first aid classes that you can take. You can become an instructor through that. Most of them are done through your county health offices. Most of them are free by grants. Just search up MHFA, mental health first aid. You can go and take a course. It's a 6-hour long course, and it really tells you how to have conversations with people. And it's not about being a counselor. It's about starting that conversation to tell them what resources are available to help them go seek counseling. So, it's a really impactful course. And I think that's probably way more beneficial than normal CPR. So
these are great resources, because what you're talking about is creating psychologically safe, what we call psychologically safe environments. And like most things, it does start from the top down. So a lot of that is, as leaders or managers, how you're setting the tone, the culture that you're creating, and then what you're modeling. So really being, intentional about having proactive and continuing conversations about how you want there to be a culture of being able to be honest about things and be open with each other. And this isn't just a one-off conversation and then you cross your fingers. It's an ongoing thing. And then modeling for people, being a little bit more authentic and vulnerable. I think that's really important as well.
We had a beautiful workshop here during May, Mental Health Awareness Month, about 3 years ago, and we brought in a guest speaker. And this is just a suggestion. I know it's kind of different now that we live in these hybrid models, but we brought in a guest speaker, someone who had attempted to take their life, and they shared their story. And they opened up the presentation just by asking a simple question. I don't remember it word for word, but it was something to the effect of, how many of you know of someone who attempted to take their life? Show of hands. And 85% of our employees, there was probably 400 people there, raised their hand. And just that visualization was super empowering, and maybe planted the seeds for some folks to start thinking about their mental health. So those little icebreakers or opportunities can really help people to start to think about their mental health in a more mindful way.
Let's move into our next topic, which is the recognition and the prevention of mental health issues. The first topic I wanted to cover, and it's we've already started that process, red flags. What do people need to look for? It could be a manager, it could be a coworker in the trades when it comes to red flags that are out there.
I think some of the red flags are a person being more irritable than usual. I mean, some of us are irritable anyway, but a change in mood, a significant change that isn't just a one-day thing, but continues. Maybe lack of energy or motivation to do the things that the person usually would be able to do. Rhonda had talked about, sleeping well, eating well. Some of those things go by the wayside when someone's starting to get depressed and anxious in a serious way. They're not sleeping well. Their spouse may notice that. They may come to work looking really groggy or tired, or like they've had, maybe too many drinks the night before. So those are some of the things to kind of, I think, watch for. And in men, a lot of times it shows up, you see it more almost physically. Like they don't want to say they're depressed or anxious, but they can say, oh my gosh, my back's killing me. I've just had this headache that for 4 days it won't go away. I can't eat, everything I eat bothers my stomach. So it might manifest more physically as well.
That's a good point.
Or lack of interest too, lack of interest in their everyday activities. And they kind of just check out mentally and physically.
And
I've seen.
not to belittle. Oh,
good. Go ahead, Jill.
Not to minimize the huge red flag. Hey, I've been feeling kind of spaced out lately, or I don't feel so well, or I'm stressed out. I mean, a lot of times we're conditioned to, just like Matt was saying with the hi, how are you doing? I'm fine, thanks. We're conditioned not to pay attention to these things.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, it's one thing when you have, a 14-year-old who's complaining about everything all the time. But when you've got these guys that generally don't talk about their feelings and they walk in and going, man, I feel like crap today. I had a fight with my wife last night. Let's stop and listen. They just opened up. Let's pay attention and ask how they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In my more recent work history, I've been involved on the industrial side. And what I've seen sometimes as a manifestation has been triggers that have happened. For example, you might have a supervisor on a project, or you might have a manager on a project who they, for whatever reason, just seem to really have certain triggers, and it puts them into a really bad spot. But it also really, in my opinion, impacts the team that they're leading or the crew that they're running. How can some of the triggers also too impact not only the person, but also the coworkers as well?
Yeah, one thing I was to say kind of goes along with that is we tend to look for, trigger or red flags with the person themselves, how they look, how they feel, how they're acting. But a lot of times people can hide that pretty well. Depressed people don't look like depressed people, right? They look like happy people quite often. And so one of the things is that their work will tend to suffer. They'll be producing less quality. Those are things that their foreman can pick up on easily, right? They know how many linear feet they're supposed to hang per hour, what their quality is. And if all of a sudden those start dropping off, that should be a key indicator for a supervisor. At least start asking some questions. I tell everybody, most companies have an employee assistance program. Have that phone number in your phone, right? If you don't have it memorized, great. Have it in your phone. Ask people if they need it. Be ready to whip it out in a moment's notice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say
that to me. Oh, go ahead, Sam.
I was going to say right there, Matt, you hit that. That was perfect. And one thing to add to that is when you see those signs, if you're asking for the purpose of this may be a sign and I want to help, make sure that approach has that sound. And the reason I say that is we talk about going back to trades again. The same thing that Matt talked about, those are the things that we fuss in. Let's just say that guys get cussed out on the job site for. So if that conversation starts with why the heck isn't your work being such and such, we don't get anywhere and we don't help that person. So we got to make sure that my approach is, if I care, that needs to be shown in that initial conversation for it to help at all, and to get to the bottom. Otherwise, that person, because you talked about personalities, we talked about ego, that person's response back is probably a F you or whatever, and we don't get anywhere. And then 2 days, 3 days later, this person takes their life at home and you're playing this all back again. So that's the other point, is making sure that approach, they understand the reason you're asking that question.
Yeah, the question is not what the hell's wrong with you.
Right, exactly. But normally production is one of the first. Normally, if you're asking about production, they don't think you're asking because you care. So you got to make sure they know it. You're right.
That's a lot of what you learn in like what it means to be trauma informed or just kind of mood informed. Is the language really matters. So you shift from what's wrong with you to what has happened to you. And, you don't have to word it that way, but that your opening is exactly what you all are saying. You're checking in more to the whole person. And there's got to be more to this story. And we are always so outcome oriented and process. So it's more like, did you get this done? Did you get it done right? And so I think this is just about what you're saying is this, it's a slowing down and it's giving people permission to show up in their humanness. But I love that shift in that language. What's wrong with you? What's happened to you?
And to help facilitate those conversations and to help make normalizing caring about people and normalizing conversations about how you're doing, it goes a long, long way. If you've been, hey, Matt, your production yesterday was off the charts, man. You rocked it.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next time I come back and say, hey, Matt, what's going on with the production? I noticed, your numbers are down, because you set that relationship of what we're talking about, that you care about the person, and you're just normalizing conversations around mental health. Doesn't have to be all negative. We can start talking about some of the positive aspects of mental health as well.
And can I add to that? The other thing I would suggest is getting to know your team, getting to know your, reaching out and having those water cooler conversations in a different way today that are really important, because that builds the trust, and the trust is the foundation to allow us to have those conversations. We have to build those relationships, express what we need in a way that we're communicating so people know how to respond or assist us when there's something that needs attention. So I think that's important as well.
The other thing too, I think, is if it's suspicious, if you feel there's something, because you hear this a lot on the news where something will happen and people will say, you know, I knew something wasn't right, or I had a feeling that was going to happen. You hear that all the time, and you kind of want to yell at the TV and you want to say, why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you talk to somebody else about this? That's the other thing too, is I think that a lot of times if we have people that might be suffering from mental challenges and mental health issues, and maybe even sometimes to the point where we feel that they might have thoughts of suicide, we, as their friends, as their coworkers, as their supervisors, managers, we have to be able to reach out to others and try. And I understand there's privacy and things like that, but there has to be a way for us to really bring this up to someone else to help that person.
I just downloaded with my kids this app called Not Okay. Support is one touch away. And so I modeled it for my kids and my husband and my mom, whose husband is going through cancer treatments. And I said, you know, it's easy, just like with fall protection and fall prevention and all these other safety things. Have a rescue plan in place before you need it, right? So my eldest has gone through several bouts of severe depression, has gone through several suicidal bouts. And it's not, I don't want her partner or her boss or her friends to be like, oh my God, what do we do? Let's have that plan in place ahead of time. So I get the call, or so-and-so gets a call, or we have a notebook of tools that we do when we start to feel this way. And you go to the person and you say, hey, we talked about this when you weren't in crisis, and you said you would like for me to help you do this. Or what do we do when we're in this state? We go to our jar and we pick out something that says phone a friend, take a walk, pet the dog. But you know, it's so much like fall prevention to have a rescue plan in place before you need it.
I love that, because the other thing that I'm really glad you brought this up, Jim, because we often teach people that the research says that mentioning and asking someone about suicide is not going to cause them to think about it.
Right.
So getting more comfortable yourself with asking people that very direct question. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Are you having thoughts of hurting yourself? And it is awkward. It's very vulnerable. But the research shows that's not going to be the thing that pushes someone over the edge. It could be the thing that gives them pause, that gets them the support they need, that changes the entire game. So getting comfortable with that yourself and being very direct is important.
You know, Jill, something you said a minute ago was that having the conversation while they're doing well, right? In order to, whenever they're not doing well, say, hey, this is what we talked about earlier. This is the help that you need. You know, what can I do? That's vitally important, because everybody has different support that they need. You know, if you've never looked at the 5 love languages that are out there, I highly encourage you to look at the 5 love language and see how to talk to people, because some people love communication, some people don't. Some people just want to be held, some want to go for a walk. So have those conversations while they're in a good state of mind, and ask them, you know, hey, when you are suffering, what do you need? Do you want to talk about it? Do you just want to lay in bed and I'll sit next to you? Do you want to go for a walk together? But you got to be supportive of them, but you have to be their supportive, not your supportive.
Right, exactly. You have to give them the agency to have control over their own care.
Yeah. I think another thing that can help is to start out these kind of conversations in a more general way, so the person doesn't feel like they're just necessarily being targeted, even though your concern is for them particularly. But say, you know what, it's been stressful, hasn't it? You know what I mean? As a whole, at our company, in our family, whatever your situation is, and it just kind of softens then the conversation to where maybe they'll be more open to hearing it.
Let's talk about treatment options. A very good friend of mine, Raquel Packett's, she's the president of Zen Freight Solutions here in the Pittsburgh metro area. And I started to learn more about mindfulness and doing meditation and reflection from Raquel. What I really find beneficial from it, it's my form of really self-care for myself when it comes to my mental status. So a lot of the care can be done, self-care through the individual, but then there's also professional and medical assistance programs and things like that out there. Let's talk a little bit more on the aspect of the self-help that people can do that are watching right now. And then we can go into talking more about the programs and other type of resources out there. Anyone could start this off.
I love
There
talking
are some
about
great.
self-care. Oh, sorry. Who was that? Who was that? Sorry.
Was it Juliet?
Just
Did
real
you read
quick,
one?
just
Go
real quick, there are some great self-care kind of meditations and visualizations you can get anytime for free on YouTube. And there's so many you can pick and choose and check them out. But I sometimes recommend those to people as just everyone always has their phone with them. It's easily accessible. So that's one meditation resource. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna
Andrew
say,
posted on here about Amen clinics as well. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Juliet.
sorry. So self-care, I love talking about that because it gets so watered down, as a lot of buzzwords do. So sometimes it can become another thing we feel like we're not good at, or like, who has time for self-care? But it's really important to understand the why behind self-care. And that is kind of making your foundation more solid, making sure you're slowing down and checking in with yourself. My colleague coined the term soul care, which kind of has like a deeper kind of resonation for me. It's like, yeah, what is the thing that really nurtures your soul? So sometimes people think that has to be like a trip to the spa or something, which, like, yeah, that's super nice and awesome. But sometimes it's just drinking enough water during the day, pausing to take a few deep breaths during the day. Sometimes it's saying no to someone and setting a boundary. Like, self-care, soul care can look it's unique. It's very individual. So I just kind of want to toss that out there too, that there are a lot of like things you can find for what might be self-care, but it's really personal. But yes, and I love just kind of basic online, like she said, YouTube, that's great. One of my favorite apps is Insight Timer, INSIGHT, Insight Timer. And there are a lot of really good like meditations, guided meditations on that app too. So it's another good resource.
Or support groups, particularly for the trade, people in the trade coming together, creating a safe community where you can have those conversations outside of work, maybe learn or participate in a hobby that you all enjoy, and just opening up your mind to having these conversations so that we can kind of break down the barriers that we sometimes aren't even aware of. So, and like, as you alluded to, Juliet and Jill, for each person, it's going to be very different. So mindfulness is not going to work for some people. They just don't buy into that. And for some people, it's going to be the science. So give me just the facts. Tell me how my brain works. Education is super key. Just learning that we all are going to respond very differently, and different triggers are going to come up, and just learning how to mitigate ahead of time some of the potential issues that are to come up. Having a timeline, like having a game plan and individualizing that, can be really important. I think, I don't know if any of you have followed Dr. Andrew Huberman. He really is into all the neuroscience, talks about neurons. So for all the guys that maybe, that masculine kind of mindset is still keeping some barriers up, he breaks it down in a really cool way that makes it a little more accessible, I think, to people who, like my husband, for instance, he's in construction. He just doesn't buy it. But for some reason, this man resonates with him. And he's like, oh, so that's what's happening,
Earlier on a post, Andrew Calhoun from Amen Networks was talking about, or clinics, was talking about related to mental health. Sometimes this is related to brain issues as well. And, we're working in construction, we're working in industrial type of jobs where there are going to be head injuries. Sometimes those head injuries happen. They're not reported, but also too, every person's not the same. For me, mindfulness works very well. And I like what Andrew has said in his last post on there about, talk a little bit more about self-care, because I think for me, in my opinion, and I'm not obviously any type of credentialed person, I really think a lot of the key to this is self-help. Everyone really needs to focus on self-help. And then those cases that are going to be a little bit going towards the extreme, that's where people need to step in and be able to help out. A little bit more conversations if we could have about brain health and things like that versus just being a mental condition.
Yeah. So Rhonda and Jim, y'all both said something that, everybody's a little bit different. And I just want to really key in on that because self-help for every single person is going to be a little bit different. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Juliet, you mentioned going to the spa is great. My wife got these 1 hour dark flotation things where we got to float in a tub of salt water, and it's supposed to be I spent 12 of the worst minutes of my life in there. And so she ended up with an hour and 48 minutes because so everybody's a little bit different, but there's all kinds of things that people can do. The biggest issue is they just need to try, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the spa's not for them, go out to the woods, go for a walk, go sit in a botanical garden, try light therapy, get a goldfish, eat healthy. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do to help your mental condition. And while it may work well for some people, it's not going to work well for you. So you really need to figure out what you need in order to help yourself the most.
I say start a live broadcast. And have a great panel too.
If I could add one more person, Susan Heaton, I participated in her Wild About Nature Challenge last month. So she's in Canada and she has a program that's being utilized all around the world. So it's this monthly, they go through the alphabet. I participated in last month. So the first day of the month, say December 1st, your focus is on A. So now your reticular activating system is concentrating on A. So you go out in nature, you're in the great outdoors, you step away from technology, and you're just more mindful in the moment. You slow your thought process down, and now you're focusing on something, a derivative, using your different sensory perceptions, and she's found that's been really successful for people and companies in really highly stressful environments, because now it's just a fun wellness activity, but people don't understand that it really is helping foster your mental health and well-being and making you more mindful of your day-to-day.
So it needs to be fun, though, Ron. It needs to be fun, because some people, they'll say, "Hey, let's take up golf. That'll ease my stress," and then they're more stressed out on the golf course tomorrow work, right?
Yeah. It's a fun, healthy environment. So you can see, and people post pictures of different things, and so you actually learn, and you're very distracted. And it engages your mind in a way that brings you back to maybe our primitive way of thinking. So I really felt that it's a beautiful program, and she offers that, like I mentioned, to companies or just individuals. And it's another way to tap into mindfulness without using the word mindfulness.
So as we go ahead.
I just love this idea of incorporating fun, because I think as adults we forget about that sometimes. We're all about having our kids have fun, but not role modeling it. When the pandemic started, I started hosting these outdoor disco parties, socially distanced. They were such a hit, and I could just see everybody's stress melt away from them when they were dancing. And I encourage clients to, it might not be that for everyone, but I encourage them, like, what did you love when you were a kid? What did you do and you lost track of time? You lost track of time. Well, I loved painting in my room by myself, all day on a Sunday afternoon. Well, nobody's stopping you from doing that again. So kind of, either, picking up your old hobbies, but then also being open to new ones, I think, can be an important part of this.
Sarah, was it social distant dancing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Outside.
I love that. That's awesome. Do a disco outside during the pandemic. No, those are such a creative things that were done. What was cool, again, like I said, I don't want to call the pandemic cool. The pandemic really forced me to focus in on not only myself, but my family, my professional life. And it really was a transformative event for me. And I know a lot of people say that, after major pandemics, life does change for the societies that go through these things. And, the downside, obviously, to the pandemic has been with mental challenges and stress and things like that. We talked about self-care. Now, self-care works for me. It doesn't work for everyone. Let's talk about therapy, medication, and then obviously we're going to have to, on the extreme side, it's going to be hospitalization. Let's talk about those three topics now, if we could.
I'd love to share a story when my eldest child was probably 5 or 6 and first was having a lot of issues with ADHD, with depression, anxiety, bullying at school. It was the start of a lifelong journey for us. And we had a dog that got in trouble. So my husband and I were, going through different counselors and things, and we were having the to medicate or to not medicate debate with our, for our 5 or 6 year old. And we had a dog that got in trouble, and we yelled at the dog and told the dog to go outside because he ate something he wasn't supposed to. And we yelled at him. And my little 5-year-old looked up at me and started crying and said, "Mommy, what if Oreo wants to behave? What if Oreo is doing everything in that dog's power to try to behave and just wants to be a good dog and can't? And there is nothing that Oreo can do to make herself or himself behave, but all she wants to do is behave. What if there was a magic pill you could give the dog to help that dog behave?" And we decided to medicate our child, right? It wasn't the answer, but it was part of a platform that helped Jade to be able to learn other coping mechanisms and to be able to be receptive to other things that were going to help her long run. And much like we were saying with self-care being very personal, don't give up on medication. It's very personal. It's a trial. It's adjustments. Maybe it's not for you, and that's awesome. If it's something that you want to explore, sometimes they work great for a while and then they stop working, and you have to change because your body chemistry changes or the way you're eating changes. And so I would say just be open to that as part of a treatment plan. And it is as personal and as changing as all of these other things that we've talked about.
Yeah. So I also used to have a pet named Oreo, and that's a great story. But yeah, I mean, my philosophy tends to be, and I get asked this all the time, my philosophy tends to be, it's not my go-to immediately to try medication. Obviously, I'd like to start with talk therapy, and there are a lot of us out there where, if your baseline is here, but your anxiety has you here or your depression has you here, medication can help you kind of get to that place where then it's easier to learn some of the skills and the tools that we're teaching in therapy. Because sometimes if you come into therapy and you're way off, it's hard to really process and put into action some of the things you're learning. So it's a great complement. And a lot of the research will show you that medication plus talk therapy is your best chance for sustainable long-term success. And you're exactly right, Jill, because there are so many options out there now, way too many options to be on the wrong thing. So you have to, just try different stuff and be open to that, but be in good conversation with your providers about what's going to work for you.
Yes, Juliet. And I just thought of a resource that I'm sure some of us have heard of, but psychologytoday.com. That is a great resource to be able to find a therapist. You can search by your location, although now with telehealth, you may not, you might just want to stay within your state. But by location, your insurance, the issues you're having, your age, and then you can see the psychologist or therapist credentials. And even now, a lot of us have a video on there, so you can really get a feel for that person. The other thing I would say is to encourage people to be proactive. You can check out therapists. I am not the right therapist for everyone. So I usually tell people, within the first few sessions, let's decide if we want to, if we think this is a good fit, because there's nothing worse than being, feeling stuck with somebody that you're not clicking with. So I really try to put that out at the beginning. Like, I may not be the best fit, but then I usually try to help somebody find somebody who is, that maybe has a specialization that I don't, like gambling addiction, for instance, or an eating disorder. So I think it's important to be proactive when you're looking for therapy and realize that you have a choice in the matter as the client.
And that goes back to what we all talked about earlier in terms of trust. I mean, it's not just about a specialization. It's just making a connection. I went in for nasal surgery and didn't like the doctor I met with, and very timidly went up to the front desk and said, "Can I see another doctor in your practice? I mean, this guy's going to be cutting my face open. I just didn't feel comfortable with them." Right. Right.
Yeah. That connection is the number one
true.
predictor of success. The connection with your therapist is the number one predictor. It doesn't matter the diplomas on their wall and all the letters behind their names if you don't vibe. So I think that's why a lot of us offer like free meet and greets too, to get a feel for our style too. Yeah. And if therapy is not for you, I think, there are other options. I kind of just want to throw that out there, that it's instead of just kind of having nothing and no support, There are other options, and I would start by asking your medical doctor. Usually people have a more comfortable relationship with that provider. There are coaches. There are some different feelings about that out there, but and these groups that you can sign up for online that somebody mentioned earlier, there's no need to walk through it alone, I guess is my point.
There's also spiritual counseling. So if people who their faith is really important to them, that's another resource. And, I'm not a big app person or what have you, but believe it or not, Clubhouse has great support groups on there where people just bringing out their stories and talking. And they're for different groups. There are all types of different people that you can associate with that maybe what their story is resonating with you in a way that moves you to maybe have that courage to speak up and take the microphone for a second. And once you take that microphone, you never know. That's the first step. Opening up the doors.
All this goes to somebody has to take that step. They have to reach out for help, right? There's so much help available, whether it's going to a counselor, whether it's getting medication from your doctor, whether it's going to your clergy, whether it's doing the 741 text services. It really involves them reaching out for help, right? I told y'all earlier, I tried to commit suicide twice as a teenager. I suffered from depression my entire life. At the age of 41, I finally admitted it to the first person ever, which was my doctor. And, my life's been changed tremendously since then by getting on medication. And it wasn't just like all of a sudden great, right? That we tried a few different until they found the one that really fit my genetics the best, because they are very specific to the individual's chemistry, right? And so, I'm at the best place I've ever been in my life right now. And I was raised in a great family. I've been with my wife since 1997. We got a great kid. We got dogs, right? There's no reason for depression. It's definitely a brain chemistry thing. And so for me, medication was necessary because it wasn't something I could be talked out of. It wasn't anything logical. It was something that had to be fixed medically, right?
And that's so important, that what you just said about not being able to be talked about it and taking that first step, because we've got to change the culture. Things like this panel, things like all of the work that we're all doing, becoming advocates, we've got to change the culture to make it okay for somebody to open up and feel vulnerable and say, I need help, or whatever first step they're taking. Much like you, my husband suffered for years and years before he was willing. I mean, we were literally gun to the forehead crisis mode before he said, okay, something's got to change. And so we need to set that culture that it doesn't get to that point before somebody has to hit rock bottom to say, I need to be implementing self-care. I need to have some support groups, and I need to be in a place where I'm receptive to taking a step and getting the help I need.
Yeah. One thing I want to leave with all the listeners out there is it's hard to seek help, right? Studies show 33% of people 67% of people suffering from mental health issues aren't going to seek help. And so we have to be the catalyst for change, right? You have to have those resources available. Have your EAP number, have the 741, have the suicide prevention hotline, which in August is an easy number to remember, 822, right? Coming this August. Have those resources available, have options available for people. And when you see those red flags, you have to start that conversation with them. Don't walk away from it. Ask them what's going on. Ask them how you can be of a benefit to them. And at the very least, leave them with some support options so that, maybe when they are in a bad spot, they can reach out.
The other thing too, Matt, in researching for this panel discussion, I looked at employee assistance programs. A lot of them are very, very strong and have been strengthened over the pandemic. There are third-party providers that provide also EAP, but so few employees take advantage of it. And that's the other thing too, is I think that when you're working for a company, you need to find out what EAP is available for you, what topics, what areas are covered, and take advantage of it. Even if you're having a bad day, it's not something to be ashamed of. If you're having a bad week or a bad day, to pick up that phone and talk to a counselor just to make sure again, that you have a way to resolve that challenge or issue you have, but it could also be the warning indicator of a bigger thing. What recommendations do anyone you have when it comes to employees and their assistance programs?
Yeah, it's not the employee has to know what's available. The companies need to be pushing what's available. They need to be sending out newsletters of,
good point.
Hey, we have an employee assistance program. Put postings on your wall in your break room. Have regular conversations about it. For construction companies, we have toolbox talks pretty much every week, right?
Yeah.
Have toolbox talks on mental health. What's available for the workers? Make sure that you're giving them the information, because again, most people aren't going to seek it. You have to push that to them.
And I would echo off that, alluding to what Juliet talked about, was modeling that behavior. So for us, it was, as the director of fitness and wellness, I talked about it. I talked about the fact that I utilized our EAP, and people were stunned, like, Rhonda, like, you have it all together. Oh, well, actually I don't,
We're all broken.
And actually, and so sharing your story again, and it humanizes the experience so that we all know that, okay, we all talk to ourselves. We all have these feelings and these emotions that sometimes we get stuck in our head, and we need someone or a resource to come into play so that we can deregulate some of those emotions and work from there.
That's so while we're on this topic, right? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
While we're on this topic, I think it's important to mention too that a lot of what we've been talking about, kind of the individual going for therapy, but often it's a family.
Yes.
It does. It affects the whole family.
Yes.
It affects kids. I mean, Jill spoke about that, but I think that's an important thing to keep in mind too. Sometimes I bring in spouses to sessions. I bring in kids, and not that I'm doing family therapy on a regular basis, but I do bring in people because those dynamics need to be talked about too. It does affect them.
And from what I've seen from my husband's military career and from a lot of the folks in trades, it's I'll man up and I don't need any help, but oh wait, this is affecting my wife. This is affecting my kids. So I think that's often a way, it's the same for fall protection and fall prevention. Oh, I'm not going to fall. I'm not going to get hurt. I'm bulletproof. Well, when you fall and you're out of work and your kids don't have food on the table because you're out of work for 6 months, it's that same idea of you're not just doing it for yourself. That's a huge point. You're doing it for all the people you love and care about.
But then what you have to be careful with that is that they might say, well, it sounds like my wife and kids need to go to therapy. I'm fine. So it's, it's definitely something worth discussing.
Right.
And
We need to talk. Jim, if we got a couple of extra minutes, I know we're a little bit long, but
we're doing good.
Okay. Kids, if you have grandkids, if you have nieces and nephews, if you have younger brothers and sisters, right? First off, you need to go watch The Social Dilemma. you need to watch BF Bullying, okay? And know what's going on in those kids' lives. You have to be involved with them. You can't just ask them how their day was and accept good. Ask them how their relationship is with their teachers. Ask them who they sit with at lunch, how their friendships are going. You got to be involved in their lives. Read their diaries. Go through their social media accounts. If you think you're invading their privacy, you're not. They don't have privacy. They're kids. They get privacy when they're 18 and they move out. The suicide rate for girls up to the age of 14 has gone up 150% since 2009. Whenever we got social media apps on our phones, kids are starting with depression and suicide, and unfortunately it becomes a lifelong thing. We have to hit them early. The good thing about hitting your kids early with it is if you do go to the family counseling, like Sarah said, a lot of times that will help the adult in order to go seek their own treatment.
The social media, your kids have no privacy whatsoever. Us invading our younger daughter's social media literally saved her life. So, my kids up until the age of probably 15, 16 were not allowed to have any account that we didn't have an account and password. And of course they had secret accounts. So it was checking your phone, and I looked through everything and everything's fine. I handed the phone back to my daughter and saw the look of relief on her face and said, give me that phone back. I'm going to keep it for the next hour or two. And we discovered some things on there that were very, very serious. So being involved in your kids, like, yeah, it's especially when it comes to the social media, it's crazy.
Juliet, you're going to add something, I say.
Sorry, I'm going to say one more thing, and then I actually have to hop off, unfortunately. But
No
when you were talking about the employees, EAP, all of that, I think some of that comes back to trust. So I just wanted to throw some things out there about confidentiality, too. I think sometimes employees or workers are afraid that what they talk about is going to get back to their manager, to their boss, or to somebody. And so just to reiterate our ethics and the things that we're bound to, the confidentiality we take very seriously, and we can't just go blabbing things about what happened in therapy. So, the main things are, if you say you're going to hurt yourself or someone else, then, and we kind of assess that as a suicidal or homicidal gesture, then yes, we will break that confidentiality. But I think that's really big for people to understand, that it stays in the room. And your boss can't just come and find out what you're talking about. And so I think that's important to note too. Yep.
If I can add a few things, I don't know how many minutes we got here, but I really make sure we don't miss something in this conversation. So keep in mind, we're talking about, suicides in trades. And when we dig down to who that is, right now, that number that we're sitting is still almost 60% white middle-aged men. Okay. Now, when I talk about that and we talk about reaching out and stuff, we got to understand most of the guys in that group, if you look at them, probably the same percentage. If they're on social media, they may have a page, but it's one post and they don't post a lot of stuff. So understand, it's normal for them to keep stuff in, right? And so the people around them, if we got the people on the panel, but anybody that's on this live, the people around them, the women in their life, their moms, wives, girlfriend, kids, you let them know you love them. Okay, so believe it or not, there's two funny jokes that's floating around right now. The funniest jokes always have a little bit of truth in them. They're not 100% truth, but they're close enough. There's one joke out there that says that women, children, and animals are loved unconditionally. Men are loved as much as they can provide. Now, that's not 100% truth, but that man out there on this job site who might be getting laid off in this wintertime could be thinking that. So when you're at home and he's coming in, thank you, just be honest. How many times does he take off those filthy boots and kick them at the back door and flop down on the couch and nobody says a word? How was your day? I mean, that is real. Part two of that is, there's another one that's funny out there, and I haven't Googled it, so I don't know how true it is. They said if you pull up the top whatever holidays in the United States, I think Christmas is number one, Mother's Day is number two, Father's Day is like 30 or something. So again, that's the guy who's out there working right now. And if he thinks the only, Halloween is above him. So let's really look at this and understand that, like we say, these mental things, that's what's going through his head as he's out here laboring and sweating, and this time you're working in the freezing cold with everybody sitting at home in the with the coats on. And I'm not saying, or just, with comfortable. That's that conversation. Sometimes if they're having a conversation at that point and haven't heard in a while, thank you, or I love you, or you're doing a great job, that triggers in too. So when we talk about them reaching out, make it okay for them to reach out. It's not okay to reach out if I think the only thing I'm providing for you is this roof over your head. It's not okay to reach out if I think the only reason you love me is because I brought this check home. So regardless, because this time of year, a lot of layoffs happen. Christmas is stressful. When they're thinking about, I wish I could have picked up that overtime, but they gave it to somebody else. Now my kid can't get Xbox. That is real this time of year. So let them know, regardless of what they're giving you, regardless of what they're bringing home or not bringing home. In construction, as a safety guy in construction, I was laid off 3 times. So believe me, it feels real different when you're sitting at home and you're not bringing a paycheck in there and you're starting to wonder, I wonder how she really feels today.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. And that group that we're talking about is not the group that's going to openly, hey, I feel bad today. So let's understand who we're talking about and be available to reach out to them on their terms, because they're not they don't. It's not just they're big men and tough and quiet, but they don't share their life anyway. So let's look for those signs, because for me, that's what I'm looking at. From a safety standpoint, the same group of suicides and trades is the same group of fatalities on construction sites. Right. So however we get there, we have to touch this group. They have to know they matter, their work matters, they matter at home, they matter to their family. If there is no loved ones, that what they do for this company matters. So when Rhonda, you said know your team, know that he doesn't have a wife, he doesn't have kids, he is home alone. Because if you're in your safety meeting saying your family loves you, he's the one that doesn't have anybody at home. So it didn't help him today. So be able to pull him to the side and say, this is your family. But we got to have those conversations. We got to reach this group on their terms if we really want to turn this around. Because it's a stigma, because they're not comfortable saying what needs to be said. Let them be comfortable saying that. That's what we can do as we're reaching out. That's what we can do to help.
I would say that says to me, know that we're more than our occupation. That's not first and foremost.
Yes.
That goes back to the love languages. A lot of people, they want that words of affirmation, right? They want to be said, they want to be told thank you. Some of the very best supervisors I've ever worked for, I consider them great only because of how appreciative they were of what you did, right? I mean, every day they're like, hey, that's a great job today. I appreciate that, right? And so, yeah, they do need those words of affirmation. Along with what Sam just said, there's a funny meme out there right now, and it's a very old guy sitting on his porch steps, all weathered, and it says, you worked 45 years, you worked hard for 45 years so the kids could go to grandma's house.
I thought of a funny meme too from what Safety Sam was talking about. It was at an old country store. It was just a wall hanging, and it said, I mean, it's kind of funny and kind of sad, but it said, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. If daddy ain't happy, ain't nobody care. That's that stigma we need to change.
Right.
Loving
it goes
kindness.
back to what we were all talking about, trust, and making sure that there are people in everyone's life that we know and love and care about and work with, that they have people that they trust, that they can be vulnerable and real with. And all these things that we're doing to change the culture and move the needle forward to make it comfortable for folks to talk about how they're feeling.
Just being curious too, just being curious about one another and actually caring and feeling a sense of compassion and kindness, really. Can open.
What a great discussion we've had this afternoon. I'm sure we could probably do this again and again. Let's do a round and make sure everyone talks about where you're at. If you got a website, social media, how can people get in touch with you? Jill, we're going to start with you again as co-host.
Sure. So my email is jill@safewaze.com. So about as easy as you can get. And if you have any questions, comments, need to get in touch with any of our panel members, you need access to other resources, I'm happy to help look those up for you. It really is about being accessible and being available.
And you can connect with you on LinkedIn.
I am on LinkedIn, as well as you can follow Safewaze on LinkedIn. It's funny how even just as we're building our LinkedIn presence, when I started, we had 300 followers, and we've 4 times that. And it's like, oh, we're going to make a post about mental health in construction. Can we do that? Yes, we can. We should.
Yeah.
Safety Sam.
Well, first place to find me is LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn. I was Safety Sam on there. I'm Sam Hawkins now. I took the safety off, but I am still there. Website is ydesafety.com. I got a million other places you can find me, but if you find me on LinkedIn, you can get me on everything else. I'm on Instagram. What's the other? TikTok. I'm there. YouTube, I'm there. But LinkedIn, you find me there or hit the website. And again, if you need anything, especially if you're on LinkedIn, I can give you my personal number from there to be an advocate, to be somebody you can reach out to, and to point you to, if nothing else, one of these professionals. I still don't know enough, but I'm trying to learn this. Speaking of that, I definitely want to learn more from Matt, by the way. But I want to be able to help more.
And Sarah.
Yes, I'm also on LinkedIn. The best way to probably reach me directly is my email. So it's just my last name, Souri, and then the word counseling, souricounseling@comcast.net.
Matt.
Yeah, only social media I do is LinkedIn. I don't participate in anything else. But I am very active on LinkedIn. I post a lot of stuff out there. Please, I'm listed as one of the panelists on the LinkedIn Live that you're looking at right now. So go ahead and click on me, send me a connection request. I will definitely connect with you. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to send me a message. I would love to communicate with you and see how I can help you to help your people.
And Rhonda.
I am the Director of Fitness and Wellness again at Globaltranz. So you can reach me through LinkedIn probably, or my email, which is rhonda.bompensa@globaltranz.com. I also post a podcast. It's called Work Life 360, started as a result of the pandemic. And it's really about mindfulness and showing folks how to take care of themselves mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually in the workplace. Very geared towards the transportation industry. Always love to have guests come on to speak about the services they provide, again, to help foster these conversations. I also have a website, which I'm not super active on, planting seeds for healthy living, happy living, on Instagram as well. And that's just positive affirmations or just mindfulness practices and guided meditations that I lead. So feel free to reach out. I just love to have conversations with folks as an advocate for all things well-being.
And check out the podcast. Great podcast. So many were born out of the pandemic, including some of these things where people were doing live broadcasting and everything like that. My name is Jim Kuehnle. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can also check out a soon-to-be new website for buildoutproductions.com, which is going to have all the content, streaming, and materials that come out from myself and others that I do work with as fellow broadcasters, or as I call us now, the Fellowship of Broadcasters. Panel, I so greatly appreciate this opportunity. Jill, thank you for being a co-host, and I would hope that we all can come together again, maybe in a couple months, and let's maybe do a part 2, because I think what we covered today was so important to talk about, and I really enjoyed the interaction with the viewers. And the nice thing about this type of a program is that this will live and replay. We were broadcasting this actually through LinkedIn Live, my YouTube channel, and also on Twitter. On YouTube, it will get a lot of good views there because of the topic matter we covered and the proper way of tagging it. So I'm real excited to see a lot of other people take the opportunity and to listen to what we all talked about today. Anything that we did not talk about that we will want to leave before we close out this broadcast?
I just want to remind everybody, be the catalyst for change. Go out there and push this to your people. Start those conversations in the stigma.
Very good.
What
And
he
also,
said.
what he said, definitely.
What he said. Wait a minute, wrong way. He said.
There you go, the opposite. Also, too, on the comments section in the LinkedIn live event, I put a couple links regarding things, resources for people related to workplace. Please take advantage and take a look at those. They can help you out a lot. And connect with everybody on LinkedIn and reach out to everybody on this panel. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And everyone who's watching, have a great rest of your day. And think safety, and also to be very mindful when it comes to mental health, and be an advocate for promoting mental health and safety. Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Jim.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for participating in today's live stream. If you know someone who's having thoughts of suicide, please contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255.